Howdy, y'all. It's Mar, and welcome to Elementally Intuitive Movement. Again with level O, now week 5, focusing on adaptation. Warming up with our shimmy, thinking about adaptation. The past few weeks, we've been focusing on different foundations, different spheres of awareness. So we have our base, being a stationary base that helps to support our knees and helps distribute the force evenly through our knees because of the orientation of the foot to the knee. We're hinging at our hips. We're supporting our bodies and our spines with our center, which is what the hip hinge is helping to do too, support our spines. We're breathing through our nostrils, or at least inhaling, so our nose can serve as filters. Breathing at a steady pace that's slower, if possible, so that the concentration of nitric oxide can build up, serving as our first line of defense against space invaders. We know to pause at the end of the exhale so that we can build up our CO2 tolerance. So we've been adapting to all of these different changes because now that we're aware of this information and we've gotten an opportunity last week and level 4 to really think about this information as we're practicing it and how it benefits us and how it provides us support in different ways. So we've been adapting to the changes that we've been making by choice, and that's been helping us. We've been adapting to how it feels to pay attention to just our arms or just our body or both at the same time, because that's what we've been practicing. And what the body practices, it learns how to do. That's adaptation. It's different than getting accustomed to something, and that may not be necessarily beneficial. That would be negative adaptation. Not all adaptation is positive per se, but we can choose positive adaptation. All right, level O, with our hands together. And let's think about adaptation specifically related to level O. Our bases are stationary bases. So we've been having to adapt to moving through space with these limitations and getting to explore moving through our spheres with our arms, also our hands connected being another limitation that we've been adapting to. So our hands being connected. But within this limitation, there's a lot of ways that we can interact our hands with each other and maintain them connected. So that's another adaptation that we've been making as we've been working and learning how to work with our hands as our guides and our arms guiding our bodies, with our level O getting to know our guides. Over time, with practice, we may notice that we've been shifting naturally orientation as we're following our hands into the position that feels most comfortable for our knees without really having to think about it. And that's great. That's us recognizing that our autopilot is in action and our body has indeed adapted to the practice of finding what is the most comfortable way to approach space with our vessels when we're accessing space. Maladaptive behaviors is what happens when we become accustomed to situations that don't benefit us, that are perhaps detrimental for us, that are not the most preferable for us. But because we can't do anything about it, or we feel like we can't do anything about it, we adapt to survive. Which is to say, we become accustomed to whatever the situation is. And that might not necessarily benefit us. Recognizing when we have maladaptive behaviors is a way that we can work on shifting them and work on proactive adaptive behaviors that include stating our boundaries, expressing our boundaries as kindly as possible, and removing ourselves from situations that are dangerous or put us at risk, or that we feel uncomfortable in. Now pay attention to where your discomfort is rooted. If your discomfort is rooted in opinions, maybe your opinion needs to change. If your discomfort is rooted in boundaries, that's a different story. If a boundary is being violated, then we need to express our boundaries and protect ourselves. But if what you're feeling is a response or reaction to an opinion, then maybe we can do our part to work on shifting the way we're processing or perceiving that opinion. It's another aspect of adaptation. As we're practicing EIM, because we've been practicing this same level for many weeks now, we can think about other things, other ideas, beyond simply breathing, holding ourselves up, and maintaining a solid foundation, a stable base. We can trust that our bodies know how to support us as we're exploring our spheres. Because our EIM practice is changing daily, our bodies don't ever adapt to the exercise the way that they can adapt to repetitive movement exercises. Because even though we're practicing similar motions, the practice itself is changing daily because we don't follow a same set routine or choreography. We're always changing how we're moving, because the main goal is mobilization. So in the process of doing all these movements, we are mobilizing our bodies. We're lubricating our joints with synovial fluid. We're warming up our muscles, and the interstitial fluid and the fascia that holds it all together. We're doing that, but also we're providing our body with variety. So it has to practice being adaptable. It has to practice adapting to these changes that we're giving it. The more rapidly we move, the more our body has to adapt to. The more rapidly we move, the higher the risk of injury as well. So be mindful and be careful. Go slow. Going slowly is how we lock in the patterns of motion, the maps of motion that work and that serve us more correctly. So that way, when we move quickly through them, we're less likely to injure ourselves. Adding in differences in speed creates another adaptation challenge. that our bodies now have to adapt to these changes in pace. Sometimes we have to adapt to things in our environment that are out of our control, like planes flying overhead. So we let them pass on by. That's temporary. That's another aspect of adaptation, and I think something that EIM helps us remember is that life is temporary. We need to adapt to that. Our feelings are temporary, whether they're pleasant or unpleasant. Our experiences are temporary. Once again, whether they're pleasant or unpleasant, preferable or not. How long we hold on to any emotion or sensation is up to us. If we're in an unpleasant place for too long, it's up to us to get ourselves out of that space. We can also foster mind states that feel comfortable and that support us and that support our health, because we enjoy how we feel when we're thinking about certain ideas or concepts or even just feelings or sensations. Our imagination can be a tool that helps support our health, or it can be a weapon that weakens our immune systems, depending on how we use it and what we choose to focus on. That's adapting to our human brains and adapting to our imagination. Part of what we're doing as we're practicing EIM is getting to be imaginative without having to think about it. Because part of what we're doing here is discovery. We're exploring. We're exploring different routes of motion as we're exploring our spheres with different orientations of our hands and feet. That requires imagination. We're willing to let ourselves go and follow where the body wants to go. Moving intuitively, unchoreographed. The more we practice being creative in our emotions, the easier it gets. Imagination is something we practice. And while we're practicing our EIM, we can increase the challenge by giving ourselves other things to think about, by making up stories, by being creative, by telling yourself a fairy tale. Or if you're doing it with family, take turns saying it out loud. Start the story and then pass it on to another sphere and see where they take the story. It gives you an opportunity to practice speaking while you're in motion, which is a practice of its own, because you have to be able to maintain your breath and maintain your train of thought as you're maintaining your intuitive movement. And trust me, I know that takes practice. It was a while before I could get in front of a camera and move like this and talk and make sense and hold my train of thought. So sometimes when I drop balls, you know why, because there's a lot going on while we're practicing EIM. The more we practice being imaginative, the more that tool serves us when it comes to problem solving and coming up with potential solutions, so that we can better adapt to the problems that we all have to face in the world. Create systems that help facilitate this process of adapting to living in a human body on a human planet, on the planet Earth. It's more than a human planet. There's all sorts of creatures that we share the Earth with, and that's part of it too, is recognizing that for our species to survive, we need all the other species too. Adaptation for us means ensuring that other species may be able to adapt as well, based on the choices that we're making. As the species that most affects the planet with its actions. We adapt to our environments as best as we can. I like working in nature, filming outdoors. It provides me an opportunity to practice adapting to the challenge that nature provides for me. Some days are windy, some days are wet, some days are cold, some days are hot. My terrain is awkward, but I appreciate the eustress challenge provided and getting to adapt to my changing conditions, because it helps keep me adaptable. Part of what assists with adaptability is shifting our perception. Speaking of those spheres of attention that we talked about last week, spheres of awareness, we are aware of the helicopter flying by. Perception is really important. Perception is how we are interpreting that information that we're paying attention to, that we're aware of. Those spheres that we're aware of and how we perceive it. For example, I could perceive the helicopter flying by as a personal affront and get angry that a helicopter dare fly by in the sky when I'm recording. Because they know that I'm recording. Of course they don't. It's not personal. So I don't take it personally. I know that it's temporary and they'll go by. I've learned that I can't stop my recording and start over every time something flies through the sky. I had to adapt to that. I dropped a ball. I was going to talk about something before that plane went by. And that's okay. Part of what I'm doing as I'm teaching here is helping to support my body. And in the process of supporting my body, hopefully guiding you through supporting your body, but also role modeling being human and making mistakes and dropping balls. And some of them we pick back up again, and some of them roll away, and maybe they come back later. But the balls that are most important when it comes to supporting our vessels: breath, center, base, hinge, maintaining motion, staying in motion, never doing any one movement for too long, so that we continue adapting, practice being adaptable to changes and change. Shifting foot position when it comes to the distance that our feet are gives us another opportunity to practice adapting to different foot position, different foot orientation, right? So we were talking about before. Mix it up. Our main goal, mobilization. Everything else is bonus. But while we're here, may as well take the opportunity to tell yourself a pleasant story. Because that's practice in telling yourself pleasant stories. As navigators of our vessels, we're always telling ourselves a story. That's perception. That's what I was talking about, perception. How we choose to look at the world, the language that we use when we are taking in what our spheres of attention and our awareness are paying attention to is our perception. Rather than get frustrated that I dropped that ball of perception, I was okay with it. And it came rolling back to me. How about that? So you see, that's part of the choice that we're making. That's part of what we're adapting to. We're recognizing that we can adapt how we choose to react to what's happening, to what we are paying attention to. We can determine whether our reaction is based on an opinion or if our reaction is based on a boundary. Because that's important. Because our opinions can change. Boundaries are fixed. Boundaries are inflexible. Boundaries are there in place to protect us. But beyond that, we don't need boundaries. They're there for a purpose. And we need to be aware of them, and we need to know what they are, and we need to set them for ourselves, for sure. But we don't want to be too limited or fenced in by our boundaries. We don't necessarily want to have so many of them that we become rigid and inflexible. But we need to have enough to maintain our structure, yes? Without enough boundaries, then there's not enough structure, and then we would all fall apart. So we need some boundaries to hold us together, to hold things in place. Finding the balance. And then recognizing the difference between what's a boundary and what's an opinion. Because opinions and boundaries are both preferences. The difference is that boundaries are preferences that are fixed. Whereas opinions are preferences that are subject to change, and they can change, especially if we practice changing our opinions. That's another process of being adaptable. It's practicing changing our opinions. We can think about all this because we have been practicing adaptation without even thinking about practicing adaptation as we've been practicing our aim. And now, to finish off and close out level 5, not level 5, week 5, level O, do some O to support our bagel toe and help us process tension. So no matter we are, we feel like we're at home. And that home is a loving space and place that we feel good to be presently, because home is some place that we create, and it is within us, it is within we home. All right, y'all, thank you so much for being here with me for week 5 of AIM. And then our next session will be week 6, intuitive integration, putting it all together, not having to think about it so much anymore, so much as feel it and notice and witness how much our autopilot has learned as we've been practicing AIM for these past 5 weeks. Thank you so much. See you next time.